I was sitting at the kitchen table, sipping my morning coffee, when my phone buzzed. It was a voicemail from Lila. Odd, since she usually texts. I pressed play, expecting her cheerful voice, but instead there was silence. A long, unnerving silence. Then, just before it ended, I heard something. A faint, muffled cry. It sent a chill down my spine. My name is Margot, and I'm a dental hygienist. My life is pretty ordinary, filled with routine checkups and the occasional dental emergency. But that morning, everything felt different. That voicemail was like a dark cloud settling over my sunny kitchen. I tried calling Lila back immediately. No answer. I texted her, hoping for a quick reply, but the minutes ticked by with nothing. As I sat there, my mind wandered back to the last few weeks. Lila had been withdrawing from family events, always with some vague excuse. I'd brushed it off as her being busy with work or just needing space. But now I couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. Ethan, my husband, walked in, still in his pajamas. "You look worried," he said, pouring himself a cup of coffee. "It's Lila," I replied, replaying the voicemail for him. His brow furrowed as he listened. "Maybe it's nothing," he said, trying to reassure me. "You know how phones can be." I nodded, but my gut told me otherwise. "I think I need to go see her," I said, standing up and grabbing my keys. Ethan didn't argue. That's one of the things I love about him. He's always been my rock, supporting me even when I'm chasing shadows. The drive to Lila's place felt longer than usual. My mind was racing, filled with possibilities, each one more unsettling than the last. I thought about the last time I saw her. She seemed fine, maybe a bit tired, but nothing out of the ordinary. Yet, there was something in her eyes, a flicker of something I couldn't quite place. Fear, perhaps? When I arrived, I knocked on the door, trying to keep my anxiety in check. Carter, my son-in-law, answered with his usual charming smile, but it felt different this time. Forced, maybe. "Margot, what a surprise," he said, stepping aside to let me in. "Lila's in the kitchen." I found her there, making breakfast for Olive. She looked up, surprised to see me. "Mom, what are you doing here?" "I got your voicemail," I said, watching her closely. Her face went blank for a moment, then she forced a smile. "Oh, that must have been Olive playing with my phone." I wanted to believe her, but something in her voice didn't sit right. I watched as she turned back to the stove, her movements a bit too deliberate. Olive was sitting at the table, drawing. She looked up and gave me a big smile, completely oblivious to the tension in the room. Carter joined us, leaning against the counter. "Everything okay?" he asked, his eyes darting between Lila and me. "Just checking in," I said casually, though my heart was pounding. "We missed you at dinner last weekend." Lila shrugged, not meeting my gaze. "Work's been crazy." We made small talk, but the air felt thick with unspoken words. Lila seemed distracted, her eyes flicking to Carter whenever he spoke. I noticed the way she flinched slightly when he touched her shoulder. It was subtle, but it was there. As I left, I hugged Lila a little tighter than usual. "Call me if you need anything," I whispered, hoping she'd hear the deeper meaning. Driving home, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was terribly wrong. I thought about the voicemail, the silence, and that faint cry. It echoed in my mind, urging me to dig deeper. I knew I had to find out what was really going on, even if it meant uncovering something I wasn't ready to face. That night, as I lay in bed, the question lingered in my mind. What was Lila hiding, and how far was I willing to go to protect my daughter? The next day, I found myself back at Lila's doorstep. I hadn't planned on visiting again so soon, but I couldn't shake the feeling that something was bubbling beneath the surface. As I knocked, I rehearsed my lines in my head, trying to sound casual yet concerned. Lila opened the door, her eyes widening in surprise. "Mom, you're back already?" I shrugged, trying to play it cool. "Thought I'd drop by. Maybe take you and Olive out for lunch." She hesitated, glancing over her shoulder. "Carter's home today. Maybe another time." I could feel the tension in her voice, like a tightly wound coil ready to snap. "Just a quick bite," I insisted. "I miss spending time with my girls." Carter appeared behind her, his smile as polished as ever. "Margot, twice in 2 days? We're honored." I forced a smile, feeling the insincerity seep through his words. "What can I say? I love my family." Lila looked between us, her eyes flickering with something I couldn't quite read. Fear? Resignation? Whatever it was, it made my heart ache. "Actually," Carter said, wrapping an arm around Lila's shoulders, "we were just about to head out ourselves." "Where to?" I asked, trying to keep the conversation light. "Just errands," Lila replied quickly, her eyes avoiding mine. "Groceries and stuff." I nodded, though my instincts screamed that there was more to the story. All right, another time then. As I turned to leave, Olive bounded into the room, her little face lighting up when she saw me. "Grandma," she squealed, wrapping her arms around my legs. I knelt down to her level, ruffling her hair. "Hey, sweetheart. How about a playdate at my place soon?" Olive nodded enthusiastically, but Carter's voice cut in, smooth and controlling. "We'll see, Olive. Maybe next weekend." I kissed Olive's forehead, feeling the weight of Carter's gaze on me. "I'll hold you to it," I said, standing up. Walking back to my car, I couldn't shake the feeling that I'd just witnessed a carefully choreographed performance. Lila's evasiveness, Carter's charm. It all felt like part of a script designed to keep me at bay. Back home, I found Ethan in the garage, tinkering with his latest project. "How'd it go?" he asked, wiping his hands on a rag. "Strange," I replied, leaning against the workbench. Lila seemed off. And Carter, well, he's always too smooth for my liking. Ethan nodded, his expression thoughtful. "Maybe you should talk to Jonah. He might have noticed something too." I considered it. Jonah and Lila were close, always had been. If anyone could help me piece this puzzle together, it was him. Later that evening, I called Jonah. He picked up on the second ring, his voice warm and familiar. "Hey Mom, what's up? Just wanted to chat," I said, trying to sound casual. "Have you talked to Lila lately?" "Yeah, a few days ago," he replied. "Why?" I hesitated, choosing my words carefully. "She seems distant. Have you noticed anything?" There was a pause on the line, then Jonah sighed. "Actually, yeah. She mentioned feeling overwhelmed, like she couldn't catch a break." I could hear the concern in his voice, mirroring my own. "Did she say why?" "Not directly," Jonah admitted. "But she hinted at feeling trapped. I thought it was just work stress." A chill ran through me. Trapped. The word hung heavy in the air, echoing my own fears. "I think there's more to it," I said, my voice barely above a whisper. Jonah was silent for a moment, then he said, "What do you want to do?" I took a deep breath, feeling the weight of the decision. I need to find out what's really going on. But I can't do it alone. "I'm with you, Mom," Jonah said, his voice steady and reassuring. "Whatever you need." Hanging up, I felt a sense of resolve wash over me. I wasn't alone in this. With Jonah by my side, I was determined to uncover the truth, no matter how deep or dark it might be. As I lay in bed that night, I replayed the day's events in my mind. Lila's hesitation, Carter's controlling presence, Olive's innocence caught in the middle. The pieces were all there, scattered and incomplete. But I was ready to put them together, one way or another. I closed my eyes, the question that had haunted me since that voicemail still lingering. What was Carter hiding? And how far would I go to protect my daughter and granddaughter? The following weekend, Jonah and Mia invited us over for dinner. It was a welcome distraction from the gnawing worry that had taken root in my mind. As we sat around their dining table, the warmth of family camaraderie filled the room. But underneath, I felt a simmering tension, like a pot on the verge of boiling over. "How's Lila been?" Jonah asked casually, passing me the salad bowl. I hesitated, glancing at Ethan, who nodded slightly, encouraging me to speak. "She's been distant," I admitted, my voice low. "There's something going on, and I'm worried." Mia, ever the perceptive one, leaned forward. "Do you think it's Carter?" I nodded, feeling the weight of unspoken fears pressing down on me. "There's something off about him. I can't put my finger on it, but Lila's not herself." Jonah exchanged a glance with Mia, then turned back to me. "I've been thinking the same. Lila's always been strong, but lately she seems subdued." Ethan cleared his throat, breaking the tension. "We need to find out what's really happening. Maybe talk to Lila again, but carefully." Just then, the doorbell rang, interrupting our conversation. Jonah got up to answer it, and a moment later, he returned with an unexpected guest, Carter. "Hope I'm not interrupting," Carter said, his smile wide and disarming. "Lila mentioned you were having dinner, and I thought I'd swing by." My heart sank. His presence felt like a shadow cast over the evening. "Of course," I said, forcing a smile. "You're always welcome." Carter took a seat, his eyes scanning the room, as if assessing the dynamics. "Lila's at home with Olive. She sends her love." As we resumed dinner, the conversation felt strained, with Carter steering it towards superficial topics. But underneath, I sensed an undercurrent of tension, like a predator circling its prey. Mia, trying to lighten the mood, asked Carter about his work. "How's the marketing world treating you?" He launched into a rehearsed spiel about his latest project, his words smooth and practiced. But I noticed how he avoided eye contact, his gaze flickering nervously around the room. Jonah, ever the teacher, shifted the conversation back to family. You know, Olive's been doing great in school. She's such a bright kid. Carter's smile faltered, just for a moment. Yeah, she's a smart one, he said, his voice lacking the usual warmth. As the evening wore on, I watched Carter closely, noting the subtle cracks in his facade. The way his fingers tapped restlessly on the table, the slight edge in his voice when he spoke about Lila. It was all there, hidden beneath layers of charm. After dinner, as we gathered in the living room, Carter excused himself to take a call. As soon as he was out of earshot, Jonah turned to me. Did you see that? I nodded, my heart pounding. He's hiding something. I can feel it. Mia looked concerned. What do we do? I took a deep breath, feeling the weight of the decision. We need to dig deeper. Find out what he's really up to. Just then, Carter returned, his expression unreadable. Sorry about that, he said, slipping his phone into his pocket. Work never stops, does it? We all forced smiles, the tension palpable. As the evening drew to a close, Carter said his goodbyes, his charm back in place. But as he left, I caught a fleeting look in his eyes, one that sent a shiver down my spine. It was a look of control, of someone who knew they held the upper hand. Driving home, I replayed the evening in my mind, the pieces of the puzzle slowly coming together. Carter's unexpected visit, his restless demeanor, the way he seemed to monitor us. It all pointed to something deeper, something darker. I glanced at Ethan, who was staring out the window, lost in thought. We need to act, I said, breaking the silence. Before it's too late. Ethan nodded, his expression grim. We'll figure it out, Margot. Together. As we pulled into the driveway, I felt a renewed sense of determination. I didn't know what Carter was hiding, but I was more resolved than ever to protect my family. No matter what it took, I would uncover the truth and bring my daughter back from the shadows. The next morning, I sat at the kitchen table, staring at the untouched cup of coffee in front of me. It was one of those rare moments when the house was silent, and I could almost hear my own thoughts weaving a tangled web of worry and determination. I knew I had to confront Lila, but the fear of pushing her away gnawed at me. Ethan walked in, sensing my unease. You look like you've been up all night, he said, taking a seat across from me. I have, I admitted, running a hand through my hair. I keep thinking about Lila. I need to talk to her, but I'm scared I'll make things worse. He reached across the table, his hand warm and reassuring. You won't. She needs to know we're here for her, no matter what. His words gave me a sliver of courage. I nodded, knowing he was right. I had to act, even if it meant risking everything. Later that day, I found myself outside Lila's house again, my heart pounding in my chest. I knocked, trying to steady my breathing. When Lila opened the door, her eyes widened with surprise. Mom, what are you doing here? She asked, her voice a mix of curiosity and apprehension. I need to talk to you, I said, my voice steady despite the turmoil inside. Can we go for a walk? She hesitated, glancing back into the house. Carter's out, she said finally, stepping outside and closing the door behind her. As we walked down the street, I chose my words carefully. Lila, I've noticed you've been distant. And I know something's wrong. She looked straight ahead, her face a mask of composure. I'm just busy, Mom. You know how it is. I stopped walking, turning to face her. Lila, I got a voicemail from you. It was just silence and a cry. I'm worried. Her facade cracked, just for a moment, and I saw a flicker of fear in her eyes. That must have been a mistake, she said, her voice barely above a whisper. Lila, you can tell me anything, I urged, my heart aching for her. She sighed, looking down at her feet. It's complicated, Mom. Carter, he just gets stressed sometimes. I felt a surge of anger, not at her, but at the situation that made her feel trapped. Lila, this isn't just stress. I'm here to help you, but you have to let me. She bit her lip, her eyes glistening with unshed tears. I don't know what to do, she confessed, her voice breaking. I reached out, pulling her into a hug. We'll figure it out together, I promised, feeling her tremble in my arms. As we stood there, I realized the depth of her fear, and it only fueled my resolve. I had to protect her, no matter the cost. That evening, back at home, I shared the conversation with Ethan. She's scared, Ethan. Really scared. He nodded, his expression grim. We need to find something concrete, something that can help her. Just then, my phone buzzed with a text from Jonah. Found something. Can we meet? Ethan and I exchanged a look, our hearts in sync with the urgency of the situation. We drove to Jonah's place, where he greeted us with a folder in hand. I did some digging, Jonah said, his voice low. Carter's got a history. Financial troubles, shady business deals. It's all here. I flipped through the papers, each revelation like a punch to the gut. Why didn't we see this before? I asked, feeling a mix of anger and guilt. He's good at hiding it, Jonah replied. But this gives us leverage. We can use it to help Lila. Ethan nodded, his jaw set with determination. We need to show this to Lila. She needs to know she has options. As we sat there, the weight of our discovery hung heavy in the air. It was a turning point, a chance to shift the power dynamic and give Lila the courage to break free. But just as we were making plans, Jonah's phone buzzed. He glanced at it, his face paling. "It's Lila," he said, his voice urgent. "She's asking for help. Now." The room went still, the gravity of the situation sinking in. We had to act, and fast. The stakes had never been higher, and the time for waiting was over. As we rushed to her aid, I felt a fierce protectiveness surge within me. This was my family, and I would do whatever it took to keep them safe. The road ahead was uncertain, but I knew we had to face it together, armed with the truth and the unbreakable bond of family. As we sped towards Lila's house, the air was thick with urgency. Jonah drove, his knuckles white on the steering wheel, while Ethan sat beside him, silent but alert. I was in the back seat, clutching my phone, waiting for any updates from Lila. The message had been brief, just enough to convey the desperation in her voice. "Help. Now." When we arrived, the front door was ajar, swinging slightly in the breeze. My heart pounded as I pushed it open, calling out for Lila. The house was eerily quiet, each step echoing in the silence. "Lila," I called, my voice trembling. There was a faint sound from upstairs, a muffled sob. I rushed up the stairs, Jonah and Ethan close behind. We found Lila in Olive's room, holding her daughter close. Olive was crying, her small frame shaking with fear. "Lila, what happened?" I asked, kneeling beside them. She looked up, her face streaked with tears. "Carter. He just snapped. I told him I needed space, and he lost it." Ethan crouched down, his voice calm but firm. "Where is he now?" Lila shook her head. "He stormed out. I don't know where he went." I pulled her into a hug, feeling the weight of her fear. "You're safe now," I whispered, though the words felt hollow. The threat of Carter still loomed large. Jonah looked around, his expression tense. "We need to get you both out of here, just in case he comes back." Lila nodded, her resolve hardening. "I can't stay here. Not anymore." As we gathered their things, I felt a mix of relief and dread. We were taking action, but the path ahead was fraught with uncertainty. I glanced at Olive, who clung to Lila, her eyes wide and scared. I wanted to promise her everything would be okay, but the truth was, I didn't know what lay ahead. Back at our house, we settled Lila and Olive in the guest room. The familiar surroundings offered a small comfort, but the tension lingered in the air. Over dinner, the conversation was subdued, each of us lost in our thoughts. After we put Olive to bed, Lila joined us in the living room. Her face was drawn, the weight of the day etched in every line. "I can't believe it came to this," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. Ethan placed a reassuring hand on her shoulder. "You did the right thing, Lila. You're protecting Olive, and that's what matters." She nodded, though her eyes were filled with uncertainty. "What if he comes after us? What if he tries to take Olive?" I felt a surge of anger and protectiveness. "We won't let that happen," I said, my voice firm. "We have the information Jonah found. We can use it to keep him at bay." Lila looked at Jonah, who nodded. "It's enough to get a restraining order, at the very least. We'll make sure you're safe." As we discussed our next steps, a new determination took root within me. I had been driven by a need to protect my family, but now the stakes were higher. It wasn't just about keeping Lila and Olive safe. It was about ensuring they could live freely, without fear. But even as we made plans, a part of me wondered about Carter. What had driven him to this point? Was he truly irredeemable, or was there something deeper at play? The questions gnawed at me, challenging my perception of justice and revenge. Was I seeking to protect my family, or was I driven by a need to punish Carter for the pain he'd caused? The next morning, as I prepared breakfast, my phone buzzed with a message from an unknown number. I hesitated, then opened it. It was a photo of Lila and Olive taken from a distance with a single word beneath it. "Soon." My blood ran cold, the implications clear. Carter was watching us, waiting for his moment. I showed the message to Ethan, who frowned, his expression darkening. "We need to go to the police," he said, his voice leaving no room for argument. I nodded, feeling the weight of the decision. We were in deeper than I'd imagined, and the road ahead was fraught with danger. But I knew one thing for certain. I would do whatever it took to protect my family, even if it meant facing my own fears and doubts. As we prepared to take the next steps, I felt a flicker of hope. We were united, stronger together than we were alone. And in the face of uncertainty, that was enough to keep us moving forward. The morning after receiving Carter's chilling message, I found myself at the police station, my heart heavy with dread. Ethan stood beside me, his presence a steadying force, as we explained the situation to the officer. Lila sat quietly, holding Olive on her lap, her eyes shadowed with exhaustion and fear. "We need protection," I said, my voice firm despite the anxiety knotting my stomach. "Carter's been threatening us." The officer nodded, taking notes. "We can issue a temporary restraining order, but you'll need to provide evidence of these threats." I handed over the folder Jonah had compiled, the weight of its contents pressing down on me. This should be enough. After what felt like an eternity, we left the station with a promise of action, but the reassurance felt hollow. The system moved slowly, and Carter was unpredictable. As we drove home, the reality of our situation settled over me like a dark cloud. We were doing everything we could, yet it felt like we were always one step behind. Back at the house, Lila and Olive retreated to their room, while Ethan and I sat in the living room, the silence between us heavy with unspoken fears. "What if this isn't enough?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. Ethan sighed, rubbing his temples. "We have to believe it will be. We can't let him win by living in fear." His words were meant to comfort, but the nagging doubt remained. I felt like we were fighting a battle on shifting sands, never sure of our footing. Just then, Jonah arrived, his expression tense. "I did some more digging," he said, handing me a new set of documents. "Carter's been making some shady deals. If we can expose him, it might help." I glanced through the papers, feeling a flicker of hope. "This could work," I said, though my voice lacked conviction. The stakes were high, and the risks even higher. As we discussed our next steps, the doorbell rang. My heart leapt into my throat, fear gripping me. Ethan went to answer it, and I held my breath, expecting the worst. But it was just Mia, her face a mix of concern and determination. "I thought you might need some backup," she said, joining us in the living room. Her presence was a balm, reminding me that we weren't alone in this fight. We had family, and that was our greatest strength. As the day wore on, we planned and prepared, but the tension never left the room. Each sound outside made me jump, every ring of the phone sent a jolt of fear through me. It was a waiting game, and the uncertainty was suffocating. That evening, as we gathered for dinner, Lila spoke up, her voice tremulous but steady. "I can't keep living like this," she said, her eyes meeting mine. "I need to take control." I reached across the table, squeezing her hand. "We're with you, whatever you decide." She nodded, drawing strength from our support. "I want to confront him. I need to tell him it's over." The thought of facing Carter made my blood run cold, but I understood Lila's need for closure. It was a risk, but one she was willing to take. As we solidified our plan, a sense of resolve settled over us. We were taking back control, refusing to be victims any longer. But even as we prepared, a part of me feared the unknown. Carter was unpredictable, and I couldn't shake the feeling that he had one last card to play. The next day, as we set out to meet Carter, my heart was a storm of emotions. Fear, anger, determination. They all swirled within me, pushing me forward even as doubt whispered at the edges of my mind. We arrived at a neutral location, a small cafe where Lila had arranged to meet Carter. I watched from a distance, my heart in my throat as she approached him. Ethan and Jonah flanked me, ready to step in if needed. As Lila spoke to Carter, I saw the tension in her posture, the way she squared her shoulders against his presence. Their conversation was too far away to hear, but I could see the anger in Carter's eyes, the way his hands clenched into fists. Suddenly, Carter's demeanor shifted, his expression turning cold and calculating. He said something, and Lila's face went pale. She turned to us, her eyes wide with fear. "He's threatening to take Olive," she said, her voice shaking as she reached us. The words hit me like a punch to the gut, the final twist in a nightmare that seemed never-ending. We had pushed Carter into a corner, and now he was lashing out with everything he had. As we regrouped, the enormity of the situation crashed over me. We were fighting for Lila's freedom, for Olive's future, and the path ahead was more uncertain than ever. But in that moment, surrounded by my family, I felt a fierce determination rise within me. We would not be defeated. We would stand together, no matter what came next. The air was thick with tension as we approached Carter's house, the setting sun casting long shadows across the driveway. This was it, the moment we had been building towards, the confrontation that would determine our future. I felt a mix of fear and determination coursing through me. each step forward a battle against the instinct to turn and run. Ethan, Jonah, and I moved as one, a united front. Lila was with us, her resolve steely despite the tremor in her hands. Olive was safely with Mia, away from the chaos that was about to unfold. We knocked on the door, and it swung open to reveal Carter, his expression a mask of surprise quickly replaced by a smirk. "Well, this is unexpected," he said, leaning against the doorframe with feigned nonchalance. "We need to talk," Lila said, her voice steady. Carter's eyes flicked to me, then back to Lila. "Is this some kind of intervention?" "You could say that," Jonah replied, his voice calm but firm. "We know what you've been doing, Carter." Carter's smirk faltered, a flicker of uncertainty crossing his face. "I have no idea what you're talking about." Lila stepped forward, her gaze unwavering. "It's over, Carter. I'm done living in fear." For a moment, Carter said nothing, his eyes narrowing as he assessed the situation. Then, with a sudden burst of anger, he slammed the door shut, locking us out. I felt a surge of panic, but Ethan was already moving, pounding on the door. "Carter, open up. We just want to talk." There was a tense silence, and then the door opened again, Carter's demeanor cold and calculating. "Fine. Let's talk." We entered the house, the familiar surroundings now tinged with a sense of foreboding. Carter led us to the living room, where we all stood, the air crackling with tension. "You think you can just walk in here and tell me how to live my life?" Carter said, his voice laced with bitterness. "You have no idea what it's like." "I know enough," Lila replied, her voice strong. "Enough to know I deserve better. Olive deserves better." Carter's eyes flashed with anger, but there was something else there too, a vulnerability, a crack in his armor. "I was trying to protect us," he said, his voice dropping. "By controlling us?" Lila shot back, her words sharp. "That's not protection, Carter. That's fear." As they spoke, I watched Carter closely, seeing the battle waging within him. He was a man cornered, his facade crumbling under the weight of his own insecurities. "You think you're so righteous," Carter said, turning his gaze to me. "But you don't know what it's like to feel powerless." I stepped forward, my heart pounding. "I know more than you think," I replied, my voice steady. "And I know that power doesn't come from control. It comes from love and respect." Carter's expression wavered, and for a moment, I saw the man beneath the mask, a man driven by fear and insecurity, trapped in a cycle of his own making. The room was silent, the tension palpable. Then, in a move that surprised us all, Carter sank into a chair, his head in his hands. "I don't want to lose Olive," he said, his voice breaking. Lila knelt beside him, her anger tempered by compassion. "You need help, Carter. We can't do this anymore." For a moment, it seemed like the confrontation would end in a stalemate, but then Carter looked up, his eyes filled with a mix of desperation and surrender. "I don't know how to change," he admitted, the words raw and vulnerable. It was the unexpected twist we hadn't anticipated, a moment of clarity in the midst of chaos. Carter wanted to change, but he didn't know how. "We'll help you," Lila said softly, her voice filled with a resolve that surprised even me. "But you have to let us go." Carter nodded, the fight leaving him. "Okay," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. "Okay." As we left the house, I felt a weight lift from my shoulders. It wasn't the resolution I had envisioned, but it was a resolution nonetheless. Carter had chosen to face his demons, and in doing so, he had given us the freedom we sought. Walking away, I realized that the confrontation had brought us face to face with the core themes of our journey: revenge, justice, and ultimately, forgiveness. It wasn't about defeating Carter. It was about finding a path to healing for all of us. As we drove home, the sun dipped below the horizon, casting the world in a gentle twilight. It felt like a new beginning, a chance to rebuild and move forward, stronger and more united than ever before. The house felt different now, filled with the comforting sounds of family. Lila and Olive had moved in with us, and the change was palpable. It was as if the walls themselves had relaxed, shedding the tension that had gripped us for so long. I watched as Lila sat at the dining table, her focus on a new graphic design project. Her face was serene, a quiet confidence replacing the shadows that had haunted her. Olive played nearby, her laughter a sweet melody that filled the room. It was a reminder of what we had fought for: a life free from fear, a future filled with hope. I felt a deep sense of peace, knowing we had reached a turning point. Ethan joined me in the kitchen, wrapping an arm around my shoulders. "They look happy," he said, nodding towards Lila and Olive. "They do," I replied, leaning into him. "It's a new beginning." As we prepared dinner, Jonah and Mia arrived, their presence adding to the warmth of the evening. We gathered around the table, the conversation light and filled with laughter. It was a stark contrast to the tension that had once defined our lives. After dinner, Lila stood up, holding a small stack of papers. "I have something to share," she said, her voice steady and filled with emotion. We watched as she unveiled her latest design, a vibrant piece that captured the essence of freedom and resilience. It was a testament to her journey, a symbol of her newfound independence. "It's beautiful," Jonas said, admiration in his voice. Lila smiled, her eyes bright with gratitude. "It's a reflection of everything I've learned. About strength, about family." We applauded, the room filled with a sense of accomplishment and unity. It was a moment of closure, a reminder of how far we had come. Later, as the evening wound down, Lila handed me an envelope. "This came for you," she said, her tone thoughtful. I opened it, finding a letter from Carter. His words were unexpected, a heartfelt apology, an acknowledgement of his faults, and a plea for forgiveness. It was a twist I hadn't anticipated, a reminder that redemption was possible, even for him. I read the letter aloud, the room silent as we absorbed its contents. Carter's words were sincere, filled with a vulnerability that hinted at change. "What do you think?" Ethan asked, his voice gentle. "I think it's a start," I replied, folding the letter. "But forgiveness is a journey, not a destination." Lila nodded, understanding the complexity of the situation. "I hope he finds peace," she said softly, her eyes meeting mine. As we sat together, I reflected on our journey. We had faced challenges that tested us, pushed us to our limits. But through it all, we had emerged stronger, more united than ever before. The themes of revenge and justice had woven through our story, shaping our actions and decisions. But in the end, it was love and forgiveness that had guided us towards healing. As the night drew to a close, I felt a sense of closure, yet a lingering question remained. Could Carter truly change? Would he find the redemption he sought? It was a question that hung in the air, a reminder that life was filled with uncertainties. But as I looked around at my family, I knew we would face whatever came next together. Our journey was far from over, but we were ready for whatever lay ahead. In that moment, I realized that the true strength of our family lay not in our ability to avoid conflict, but in our capacity to overcome it. We had been tested, and we had prevailed, bound by love and resilience. As I turned out the lights and headed to bed, I felt a deep sense of gratitude. We had found our new dawn, and it was brighter than I had ever imagined.
My marriage and my family's expectations are at the center of a challenging circumstance that I'm now going through. My spouse's and his mother's unrelenting pursuit of wealth seems to be overshadowing my opportunity to inherit what I am legally due. You might think that if we get married, inheriting something from your own family would be easy. But for me, that's starting to feel like a pipe dream. My spouse and his mother have a strong financial obsession. They've come to the point where they even want to claim the hard-won heritage of my late father, which is something I can never forgive. My resolve only gets stronger every day. I'm resolved to resist their overwhelming greed. Allow me to introduce myself. My name is Kathy, and I'm 40 years old. I've been married for 14 years and have a hard career on top of that. Henry, my 42-year-old husband, works at a grocery close to the station, which is where our paths initially crossed when I was attending college. When I was working part-time at that exact supermarket, we began dating casually. When I was 23, we were married. Our son Liam, who enrolled in college this spring, has finally joined our family. Despite my dedication to completing my duties, Henry's careless spending tendencies are a concerning aspect of my existence. He is free to spend our hard-earned money, but his persistent requests for additional funding and his lack of openness have only made things more difficult for us financially. When it comes to talking money, especially with his parents there, the environment becomes combative. My refusal to comply with their incessant requests frequently results in severe resistance from them. My son Liam completely agrees that when his grandparents arrive, things usually seem to get tense. In fact, Liam frequently decides to avoid them. But Liam just dropped a bombshell that made an already tense situation even more stressful. He discovered his father's adultery. I was more devastated than angry when I learned this. But Liam's encouragement gave me the courage to think about talking to my husband before making any big choices. While I was collecting my ideas about how to handle this sensitive matter, an unforeseen circumstance occurred. Suddenly, my husband and his parents were in our living room. My spouse quietly mentioned that he needed $8,000 for the plan, which led to what seemed to be a simple visit turning into an expensive trip to Hawaii. I became so enraged that I took advantage of the opportunity to confront them about my husband's infidelity, as well as their unrelenting requests for money. The seriousness of my charge set in, and the room became silent. My spouse initially disputed everything, questioned the need for evidence, and maintained his innocence when I confronted him about his affair. In response, I informed him that he had been spotted leaving a hotel with a different woman. He attempted to undermine the witness, our own kid, which caused me to hesitate since I didn't want to involve Liam in a clumsy altercation. My mother-in-law surprised me by downplaying how serious the infidelity was and implying that this kind of behavior is normal and should be ignored. That she, a woman herself, could brush off such behavior with such indifference horrified me. As if the personal betrayal was only a minor diversion, the conversation swiftly returned to their financial request for the Hawaii trip, despite the emotional pain. I realized it was time to dissolve our marriage because I was becoming increasingly frustrated with my husband's lack of moral awareness and our continual money arguments. I announced that we were divorcing in a cool, collected, yet strong voice. My spouse swiftly threatened to seize my parents' estate in the event that we went through with the divorce as payback. My cell phone rang as our debate grew more heated, breaking the tension for a time. It was my father's brother, my uncle, and he had some upsetting news. After collapsing and becoming unconscious, my father was taken by ambulance to the hospital. Before I hurried to the hospital, I briefly informed my husband's parents about the dire situation. Though not in the best of condition, I was relieved to find my father stable upon arriving. He was 62 years old and had devoted his life to our family business, working long hours to make sure we were well off. I was shocked to learn of his unexpected health issue and was forced to reflect on his priceless contribution to my life. My father regained consciousness a few days later, which eased some of my immediate concerns. My son Liam and I had a moment of relief and concern together during a visit. But a follow-up call from the physician verified the seriousness of my father's illness, which had been made worse by years of overwork. Sadly, he died soon after, and I was overcome with sadness. Liam was my constant source of comfort during this difficult time. Being the only kid, I had to take charge of planning the funeral, which was made more challenging by my husband's lack of interest. My in-laws attended the burial, showing a tactless curiosity about the family home's value and a shallow admiration for it. Following the memorial services, my in-laws surprised us with a visit while I was still processing the loss of my father. In spite of the situation, their attention was regrettably drawn to the more materialistic elements. My mother-in-law was especially preoccupied with the opulence of the home, highlighting their continued insensitivity and materialism in the wake of our family's loss. I was putting funeral clothes away and trying to work through my grief when I got a phone saying my parents were suddenly coming to visit. Feeling a little confused and uneasy, I couldn't help but wonder why they were there. My anxiety mounted, anticipating yet another discussion centered around money matters. I was ready to have a meaningful talk with them when they arrived, resolute to grasp their motives. The atmosphere changed as they entered. Having followed along, My in-laws smiled contentedly as they sat down on the couch. When my husband suddenly offered that we move out of our large house and that his parents come in with us in a new one, the anxiety increased. Startled by this proposal, I reiterated that I had made the decision to move forward with the divorce because I had to take care of my deceased father's affairs. Disregarding the facts of his adultery and our approaching divorce, my husband casually demanded that we split everything we owned, including my inheritance, as a married couple. I was enraged by this audacious demand, supposing entitlement to my entire fortune. I was even more irritated when his parents began to casually debate which room they would want in the possible new mansion. Determined to protect the legacy that my father had worked so hard to build, I vowed never to let them have their way. The audacity of my husband and his parents treating my father's house and wealth as if it were rightfully theirs had stretched my patience to its limits. A few days later, amidst these tumultuous events, I received a call from my uncle. His comforting words and support reassured me that I was handling the situation well despite the overwhelming challenges. The conversation with my uncle took an unexpected turn when he mentioned he had some urgent news to share, prompting us to arrange a meeting that very night. As he revealed shocking details about my husband and his parents, I was stunned by the gravity of the information. Determined to find a way forward, I confided in him about the outrageous demands and claims made by my in-laws. Outraged by their boldness, my uncle reassured me that he would help manage the situation. Curious about his approach, I eagerly met with him the next day, bringing along my son Liam. The plan was to enlighten Liam about the true nature of his father and grandparents and to prepare him for the difficult times ahead. Armed with this new strategy, I called my in-laws over for a discussion about potentially all 6 of us living together in my family home. The proposal seemed to catch everyone off guard, but after they realized we were serious, my mother-in-law quickly warmed up to the idea, excited at the prospect of living in what she called a dreamlike mansion. However, the excitement was short-lived. Reality hit when my father-in-law brought up the cancellation fee for their previously planned trip, demanding reimbursement. Their unabashed self-interest was glaring, and I was appalled by their audacity. Yet, my mother-in-law, unfazed, assured everyone that they would manage the finances soon enough, brushing aside any immediate concerns. Having dealt with my husband and in-laws' relentless pursuit of money for so long, I had become somewhat numb to their schemes. But this time their sheer selfishness struck a deeper chord, reminding me of the challenging road ahead in standing up to their manipulative tactics. However, Liam, who wasn't used to their blatant and greedy behavior, was clearly upset and angered by their audacity. To comfort him, I gently patted his shoulder and assured him that we would manage the situation together. As the conversation continued about the possibility of moving into my family home, I decided to play along, fully aware that their expectations were far from reality. Henry, my husband, probed into the logistics of the move, his tone unusually sharp. Trying to ease the tension, I explained that Liam and I would head over first to get the house ready, emphasizing that it was a substantial task and we needed to start early. However, Henry expressed doubt about Liam's ability to handle such responsibilities, given his student status. I skillfully steered the conversation, assuring him that Liam was more than capable of managing his tasks. Although Henry remained somewhat skeptical over trivial issues, despite the tension, my mother-in-law was cheerfully oblivious to the undercurrents. The conversation soon drifted to the size of the mansion and the number of rooms, which seemed to excite her. Seizing this chance, I told them they could choose their rooms first, and even suggested a gradual approach to cleaning and organizing, considering my busy work schedule. My measured responses served to temporarily satisfy their expectations, leaving them pleased with what they perceived as a victory. In my mind, I harbored a plan to challenge their presumptions and bring their lofty expectations back to earth. The moving day was scheduled a month later, giving me some time to strategize and perhaps change the course of events to better align with reality and fairness. I was filled with a mix of anticipation and determination as the decisive day approached. The day when my husband and in-laws were expected to arrive with a moving truck, believing they were about to take possession of what they thought was their new home. Liam and I stood at the front entrance, ready to meet them. Ignoring my husband's attempt at humor, I noticed the sparkles of excitement in my in-laws' eyes, oblivious to the fact that their illusions were about to be shattered. As the gate swung open, my uncle, my father's brother, stepped out of the house. His presence was silent yet imposing. He confronted my husband and in-laws, leaving them puzzled. It was clear that my husband barely remembered my uncle from the funeral. Setting the record straight, my uncle asserted his ownership of the house and clarified the details of the inheritance distribution. The shock on my husband and in-laws' faces was evident as they came to terms with the gravity of their misunderstanding. Despite my uncle's assertive explanations, my husband tried to remain calm, seemingly attempting to gloss over the confrontation. However, the tension escalated when Liam stepped in, accusing his father of infidelity. This revelation left my husband visibly shaken and exposed, unable to deny the truth his son had unveiled about him being seen entering a hotel with another woman's suspicion I had harbored was now confirmed. When confronted, my husband adamantly denied the accusations, refusing to admit to his wrongdoings. Liam, distressed by his father's actions and their impact on our family, urged his father to leave our lives for good. Despite this emotional plea, my in-laws were still primarily focused on financial matters, insisting on a formal division of property. Their indifference to the personal agony they were causing was highlighted by the striking contrast between our family's emotional turmoil and their unwavering pursuit of financial gain. I was completely shocked to hear that my in-laws had resigned their jobs and given up their flat in order to enjoy a relaxed lifestyle at what they believed to be the family mansion. The revelation that my spouse and father-in-law had quit their employment and intended to live off of what they thought would be their portion of my father's estate made it even more shocking. Perplexed by their snap judgments and conceited demands, I remained steadfast, claiming my legitimate inheritance as my father's daughter and expecting a just distribution of his vast assets. Luckily, my uncle took over to handle the legal parts as he too was a lawyer. Supported by substantial evidence obtained over the course of a month-long inquiry, he exposed my husband's adultery. My spouse's parents were taken aback by this revelation, which ultimately caused them to acknowledge the seriousness of their errors of judgment. I told them, with my uncle's help, that we would have to take legal action for any more conversations and that they could never get in touch with me again. My husband gave them a short, threatening glance, but they left without any more problems. I conveyed my sincere appreciation to my uncle for his invaluable assistance. My father and grandfather's desires were fulfilled when my son Liam and I moved into the family home after the court case. I was incredibly appreciative of the chance to live in a home full of treasured memories. Liam committed himself to his studies in order to become a successful lawyer, motivated by his uncle's example. In the meantime, my ex-husband's parents went through a difficult period of unemployment, moving into an outdated apartment. As my ex-husband, who was now experiencing financial hardship, asked for assistance, the consequences of their conduct started to become apparent. But now that we were totally cut off, I refused to give them any money, which made us even more distant. Their prior plan to finance a luxurious trip that never happened fell apart even more, revealing the depth of their deception as my ex-husband struggled to adapt to his new reality of working day jobs and part-time hours. Freed from these obligations, I concentrated on my work and excitedly anticipated Liam's college graduation. Glad to have overcome such major obstacles, I was eager to turn a new page in my life. My name is Jenna, and I recently got married at the age of 29. Bobby, my 31-year-old spouse, works at an office. Our tale changed when Bobby chose to bring his younger sister, Doris, into our just-purchased house without consulting us first. This is a $500,000 home that was custom-built for us as newlyweds. Bobby and I were highly active in the design and decorating of our home from the moment we were engaged, ready to move in as soon as possible following our marriage. The first thing that struck me when I moved in was how much Bobby had. Perplexed, I asked, "Bobby, is there enough space for everything? It appears to be quite a bit." With a hint of scandal, he said, "Oh, did I not mention? Doris will be residing with us." I questioned, completely taken aback. Why would Doris move in now? We recently tied the knot. Bobby brushed off my worries, saying, "It's not a big problem. Since Doris is also family, cohabiting shouldn't present any issues for either of us. She desires to remain in the newly acquired home." I protested, emphasizing that there had been no prior conversation. But Bobby disregarded me and carried on unpacking. He became so antagonistic that he even yelled, "You can go if you don't like it. Doris will remain. I've already decided, so quit whining." I was not persuaded at all, and I even threatened to ask my brother for help. Bobby retreated swiftly, fearing a confrontation. "Hold off on calling him. Look, this won't be Doris's last visit. All she needs is a place to stay while she looks for work and a place of her own. Are you able to comprehend that?" I nodded reluctantly and said, "All right, but is Doris allowed to stay in the guest room?" Bobby paused, then said, Yeah." But it was obvious that he was unsure of himself. We were toasting to our relocation after a hectic day of unpacking and putting Doris's possessions into the guest room when the doorbell rang late at night. Bobby hastened to respond, curious. It was Doris, much to my dismay. I was in the kitchen getting ready for bed, and not feeling friendly when Bobby said, "Hey Jenna, Doris is here." I said, attempting to hide my irritation, "Hello Doris. Why are you here at this late hour? Can I come home whenever I want now?" Doris brashly retorted, "Big bro, show me my room. It's quite spacious." "This isn't the right room," she protested as soon as she led Bobby to the guest room. "Did you not say that it was larger?" Then she ran upstairs, looking for a different room. I followed them and was appalled to see Doris claiming my assigned workspace as her own. I became quite irritated and said, "This is my workroom," raising my voice. "Your room isn't ready yet." "Why not make this Doris's room?" Bobby interrupted. The sanctity of our newlywed house and marriage was being threatened by the rapidly worsening circumstances. I forcefully refused to back down, saying, "No way." In an attempt to reach a middle ground, I proposed Bobby's assigned workstation, the room next door, which was also very large. I gestured to it, but Bobby seemed clearly upset. "That room is not it. I've been eager to put it to use. In fact, I chose the wallpaper myself." "Not at all. We were now utilizing the future children's room as a guest room, and it seemed to be the only other option. Still not happy, Doris angrily yelled at me. "You really are a bit of a brat, don't you?" Not paying attention to the household leader. Quite naughty considering that she depends on him for food. Her accusation left me tired and depressed, and I asked myself, who's the real freeloader here? I went back to the living room to continue enjoying our move on my own. I ignored their arguments until Bobby addressed me and said, "You're always opposing me, acting all high and mighty." I could hear them shouting from there. "If you can't listen to me, get out," he said as he grabbed the wine bottle and took a big swallow. "In this household, I am the head. Never undervalue me." He then bounded off with Doris. I decided to call my brother despite the fact that it was late and I was feeling stressed. He responded right away, sounding irritated. "Hey, are you crazy? Did you get any sleep?" I apologized for my inquiry. I had called, it turned out, while he and his wife were having a fight. About the timing, he half joked, saying, "What's up? Did everything go according to plan during the move? I'm sorry not being there. Isn't it done now? You should talk to your wife, don't you? Should I just leave her in this state?" When I started telling my brother about how Doris had moved in from day one, how she didn't want the guest room, and how my brother and Doris were treating me, he became concerned that I was being treated in a way that resembled a servant. I dismissed his concerns with a joke and said, "You do realize that I'm your sister? Me, a helper? Let them try if they believe they can handle that." "Good point, but call me if anything happens," my brother jokes. Then we started talking about his problems. When I found out his wife was having an affair and visiting other guys she met on a dating site, I was astonished. She had accidentally sent him a note intended for her partner, which is how he found out. After obtaining evidence, Bobby, who had been doubting her for some time, took her phone and returned her to her parents. The following day, he was going to her parents' house to talk about everything. We acknowledged that we were both in difficult circumstances and agreed to keep in touch as we closed our conversation. I hung up and busied myself unpacking the rest of the boxes while I waited for Bobby and Doris to come back. They returned late at night, merry and inebriated. Tension rising, I unpacked anyhow, preparing myself to greet them. Bobby and Doris came up to me with what they considered to be an extremely clever solution. "We can each sleep in our workrooms if we shift our bedroom to Doris's. How do you feel?" "I think it's a great idea. Please make sure Doris has a room by tomorrow." After pausing, I answered, "Let me make one thing clear first. How much will Doris pay each month for groceries and home supplies? I take it that she does not intend to remain here indefinitely. What is her intended duration of stay?" Bobby gave my queries a nervous look. "You're asking Doris for money, but who doesn't work? You should not worry. I will pay for it out of my pay." With a tone of entitlement, Doris added, "I'll stay till I'm satisfied. My mom cooks in an outdated manner, and I detest her constant nagging about cleaning and laundry at home. I don't have to pay to do what I want here. It's flawless. Jenna, why don't you move out if you don't like it?" I snapped back, "Then let's divide the household expenses. I will cover my share with my income. You can use your salary for yourself and Doris." They seemed oddly pleased with this arrangement, even though I added, "And you'll need to take care of your chores." Feeling they weren't taking me seriously, I left a written note about our agreement. The next day, still concerned about my brother, I decided to visit him at his office. He had taken over as the president of a construction company after our father passed away last year. Surprised to see me, he invited me to speak. First, I explained the situation at home and asked if there might be a position for me at his company. Our secretary is leaving due to her husband's relocation. It's good timing, he replied, agreeing to hire me. Then he shared his troubling news that left me stunned. His wife was pregnant, but it was clear the child wasn't his. The evidence was on her phone, filled with messages, photos, and videos of her lovers who now wanted to shirk responsibility upon learning of the pregnancy. When I asked if he was considering a divorce, he replied, "It will be tough for the kids, but I see no other option." I advised him to consult with a lawyer for a proper discussion. Returning home, I was haunted by the images and texts of my sister-in-law's affair. Despite knowing her as a loving, family-oriented person, her betrayal felt like losing a close friend. Tears welled up as I processed the shock. Amidst these thoughts, Doris persistently knocked on my door, breaking into my reverie with, "Hey, I'm hungry. Can you make something?" Doris's voice echoed through the door, but I was too shocked and drained to respond, so I let her be. Then my phone rang. It was my husband, likely calling from work. Anticipating the direction of the conversation, I chose not to answer. I just wasn't in the mood to talk. Shortly after, I received a text from my brother asking if I could accompany him to a lawyer the following day. I simply replied with an okay sticker and must have drifted off to sleep. I was abruptly awakened by my husband's loud voice. "You didn't even prepare food for Doris, and you're sleeping? What's that about?" he roared. Without a word, I just held up a written pledge we had made, signaling him to read it. Realizing the situation, he told Doris, "Let's let her sleep today. She seems off. We can talk about this tomorrow." "I'm not sick, just tired of this," I mumbled, rolling over to sleep again. The next morning, I quietly left the house without waking my husband and headed to my brother's place. He looked like he hadn't slept at all, with bloodshot eyes. Before anything, I helped get his kids ready and took them to kindergarten. During the drive, they shared that their parents had argued and their mom had left the house. Mommy was the bad one. She left us at home and went out. We cried because we were left alone. So Daddy got angry, they said innocently. I reassured them, "If you're lonely, call Auntie, okay?" Their cheerful yay made it clear they weren't too sad about their mom's absence. After dropping off the children, my brother and I went to see the lawyer. The lawyer confirmed that the evidence on my sister-in-law's phone, photos, videos, and messages, was more than sufficient for a divorce case and to argue for parental rights. After my brother shared his story, I also got a chance to discuss my situation. The lawyer offered some advice, and my brother dropped me back home. He mentioned he'd be gathering the family later to discuss the divorce. "If anything happens, give us a call. We're all here for you," he assured as he left. When I walked into the living room, the house was a complete mess. They had attempted to make breakfast, leaving the kitchen greasy and dishes strewn about. The sight was frustrating. I hesitated to clean up after them, debating whether to address the chaos. Just then, Doris appeared. "Where did you go without making breakfast?" "Bobby didn't eat anything and had to go to work hungry. Isn't it unacceptable to abandon household chores as a wife?" She confronted me. I responded firmly, "You know what? I'm not your maid or servant. Weren't you taught to clean up after yourself as a child?" Ignoring her repetitive complaints, I decided not to let her provocations affect me anymore. The situation at home needed a resolution, and I was determined to make sure everyone played their part responsibly. "But you're the wife," Doris retorted. as I stormed to my room, only to find that my belongings were gone and Doris's items had taken over my space. I was shocked and confused. I confronted her in the living room. "Did you go into my room? Your stuff is everywhere. What's going on?" With a smug look, Doris replied, "Oh, I've always loved your room. It fits my neat and cute image perfectly, don't you think? I moved your stuff into the guest room." Fuming, I hurried to the guest room, where I found my computer and belongings carelessly tossed aside. The disrespect was palpable, and my anger boiled over. This was beyond tolerable. A burning desire for retribution ignited within me, and I resolved never to let this slide. I planned to confront my husband, Bobby, the moment he returned home. I'd show him the chaos Doris had created and ask him, "Do you want to live like this, with Doris and me constantly at odds?" Bobby returned unexpectedly early, likely tipped off by Doris. I could hear his heavy footsteps approaching the guest room. It was clear he knew about the switch, and I braced myself for the worst. When Bobby burst through the door, his expression was fierce, with Doris grinning triumphantly by his side. "You went against Doris," he accused. "Aren't you my wife? Isn't it your job to look after me and your sister-in-law?" At that moment, any affection I held for Bobby evaporated. He stood there, not once defending me or acknowledging Doris's invasive behavior. No calls for her to move her stuff back, and no questions about why she was disregarding my personal space. Determined, I challenged him. "If this is how it's going to be, I'm inviting my brother over. He's never seen our house. Maybe it's time he does." Despite his usual apprehension about my brother, Bobby's demeanor changed with Doris beside him. "Are you sure about that? If you let that thug into our house, I'll kick you out," he threatened confidently. "So kick me out. Try it if you can. I'll call my mother, my brother, and his wife to see this place," I retorted, unflinching. His face hardened as he warned, "Do not dare call your family. If you don't like it, then leave." Then Doris interjected with a smirk, "This is my castle with Bobby. You know you have no right to call anyone here. Even if your family comes, we'll just kick them out." Unfazed, I grabbed my phone. "I'll call my brother then." To Bobby and Doris, I added, "Perhaps we should live apart. You two can have fun, invite your friends, and party all you want. Sounds like you prefer that." Their faces lit up at the idea, and Bobby even suggested, "Maybe we should just get divorced already." Fed up with their disrespect and unyielding attitude, I decided to make the call. It was time for my family to see firsthand the situation. I was dealing with the reality of our fractured relationship, which became starkly clear. But I was ready to take a stand as Bobby and Doris buzzed with high spirits, thrilled at the prospect of having the house to themselves and thinking of ejecting me. I calmly warned them, "All right, but you'll regret this. I'm calling my family now." I reached out to my brother, who responded eagerly, "We've been waiting for this. We're on our way." His readiness to jump into action moved me, showing his anticipation of my call. Within about 25 minutes, my family arrived. Doris, who had previously threatened to kick my family out, turned pale at the sight of my brother. "Oh, Doris, I thought you were going to kick out my family when they arrived," I remarked. She could only shake her head weakly in response. Seeing Doris so subdued, Bobby also seemed to shrink back in fear. My brother, a former judo competitor with a national ranking until a knee injury in college, stood imposingly over 6 feet tall with a buzz cut. Now coaching at a local boys' club, my younger brother, also a judo practitioner, mirrored his appearance. They had both been memorable figures at the wedding. Huh. We're getting kicked out by who? Isn't it you guys who are leaving? My elder brother laughed, to which Doris tried to muster some bravado. Yeah. My brother is divorcing his useless wife now. Please leave, my younger brother retorted. What? You guys are the ones leaving, aren't you? This is Jenna's house, isn't it? Built with her share of our father's inheritance and in Jenna's name. While this unfolded, my mother began tidying up the kitchen and remarked, "Oh dear, what a mess." Then, calling out to my brothers, she said, "Don't drag out the conversation. Get to the point already." Taking her cue, my brothers turned to me. "Another person is coming. Let them in when they arrive," they instructed, while gesturing for Bobby and Doris to sit down. "We have two matters to discuss today. The first is that we need you to leave," my brother told my husband and Doris. When Doris incredulously asked if it was true that the house belonged to me, Bobby started to falter. "Well, I was talking to the contractors about the interior and stuff, so I thought it was my house. But maybe it's not. But I'm the head of the household, right?" It was clear he had misconstrued being the head of the household as ownership without considering the source of the funds. "You know that being the head of the household and being the owner of the house are two different things, right?" was the reply, leaving Bobby speechless. However, Doris stubbornly retorted, "I won't leave. Do you know about residency rights? I have rights, so I won't leave. If you don't want us here, you leave," glaring defiantly at me. "You seem to have researched this thoroughly, but this isn't a rental property, and you're not paying Jenna any rent, are you? So residency rights don't apply here," my brother pointed out. Bobby, sensing the gravity of the situation, began to resist their attempts to dismiss his claims. "But I'm married to Jenna, right? I can't just leave." "I won't separate," Bobby argued, clinging to his last shred of defense. Just then, the doorbell rang. The guests my brothers had mentioned had probably arrived. I opened the door to find my sister-in-law, my older brother's wife, standing there with tears streaming down her face. Before letting her into the house, I turned to my brother. "Your wife is here with your child. What should we do?" My mother, ever the peacemaker, suggested she would take the child to a room upstairs. After guiding them upstairs, I allowed my sister-in-law to enter the house. Bobby, caught off guard by her appearance, stammered, "How did you find out where we live? Please, just go home for today." Bobby's suspicious demeanor did not go unnoticed. My elder brother stepped in, his voice heavy with disdain. "Ha! Did you forget my wife's face? This is the second matter we need to discuss." The color drained from Bobby's face, a mix of confusion and fear taking hold as he mumbled, "You mean she?" It seemed Bobby hadn't realized she was my brother's wife. In a panic, he looked like he was about to flee, but was rooted to the spot. My brother, holding up evidence of the affair, confronted him. "Seems like my wife is pregnant with your child. Did you two plan this?" Throwing down the evidence on the table, he declared, "For me, it's divorce, nothing less." Hearing this, Doris, fearful of being caught in a scandal, blurted out, "I will pack my things and go back to my parents' house," and made a move to escape. Upstairs, my younger brother quickly stepped in. "We've got a truck loaded with boxes. Start packing your things right now. I'll get the boxes." Doris hesitated, asking, "Am I leaving today?" But one stern look from my brother made her relent. Meanwhile, my elder brother told his wife to sign the divorce papers as he handed them to her along with a pen. Seeing the custody section assigned to my brother, she hesitated, but he firmly told her, That's what the kids want. Your opinion doesn't matter." With tears streaming down her face, she signed the papers. "Next time, take care of the child in your belly. I won't ask for child support in return. Don't ever show your face to my kids, unless they want to see you. I won't stop them when they grow up," he stated, as she apologized to him on her knees. Watching this unfold, I realized the depth of pain my brother had been bearing. Then the focus shifted to me. "So Jenna, what are you going to do?" my elder brother asked. I responded without hesitation. "I choose divorce too. I want him out of my house as soon as possible." At this, Bobby dropped to his knees, begging, "I don't want a divorce. Please forgive me. I beg you." He then added desperately, "Besides, it could be his child, not mine." This only solidified my decision. I had seen enough deceit and was ready to reclaim my life and my home. Bobby was stunned to hear my brother say, "I'm done having kids. I've had surgery to ensure that," with such composure. Then my brother gave me the divorce documents and said, "Have him sign these if you want him and Doris out of the house right now." I asked my husband to sign the documents, and he did so without much thought, possibly realizing there was no getting out of the mess he'd made. I gave him and Doris the pledge forms my lawyer had produced after he signed. These agreements forced them to promise never to return to my house and to pay me back for the almost $50,000 in damages they had caused. With his shoulders hunched, Bobby reluctantly signed the commitment under my brother's watchful eye, then trudged upstairs to start packing his things. In the meantime, my brother remarked, somewhat sarcastically, "Oh, I got a marriage license for you guys when I picked up the divorce papers." He gave it to his wife, who signed it and shoved it in Bobby's direction without thinking twice. "Sign it right away. You must accept responsibility for the disaster you've made in my life. You can't just leave. I'm having this baby." Bobby signed the paper, looking frantic as he cried, "Just do whatever you want." Still not done, my brother pushed Bobby, saying, "Hey, you won't say anything unless I ask, huh? Are you lacking any words of wisdom for me?" Bobby immediately apologized profusely for this, almost bending to the ground in regret. Together, we worked fast to pack Bobby and Doris's possessions into boxes and load them onto a waiting vehicle to be sent to their parents' home. So my short married existence ended abruptly, but firmly. My mother suggested selling her home so that she and my younger brother might move in together, as I was thinking about living alone in the large house. My elder brother made the decision to move in with his 4 kids and sell his own house. With the money from the sale of their property, they intended to purchase my house, jokingly proposing, "Why not build a new house when you get married next time?" "I'm good with an apartment," I persisted. We built a life full of joy and happiness together, even with the house's history of sad memories, and we obtained the dog that the kids had always wanted. 8 months later, my ex-husband weed my ex-sister-in-law and moved in with her at his parents' home. He had to put in a lot of overtime labor to make up for the harm they had done to my residence. She reached a breaking point and lost her mental equilibrium as a result of Doris treating her new sister-in-law like a maid. Eventually, Doris's mother sent her out because she could no longer stand to see her daughter in that state. In a desperate attempt to get assistance, Doris contacted my ex-husband, but he scornfully accused her, stating, "We would still be residing in that mansion if you hadn't moved in." In sharp contrast to my own family's fresh start and cohesiveness, Doris ended herself alone, isolated, and without support. My mother-in-law was very clear that she did not welcome anyone into her home who did not want to help out around the house. She seemed to expect me to apologize, even feel a little regret. My spouse, meanwhile, was seated next to her, a faint smile spreading across his lips as though he enjoyed watching me chastised. Quite the opposite of what they would have anticipated, I experienced a sudden calm wave. After that, I'll head out, I said firmly and without hesitation. I made the decision at that point to stop worrying about their behavior and views. I realized that they would eventually have to face the consequences of their actions. Elizabeth is my name, and I'm 40 years old. I manage our home and a full-time career at the same time. The 3 adult children that my spouse Andrew and I have moved out to start their own lives. Originally, Andrew and I planned to spend this time together, but things changed when my mother-in-law moved in with us. She was widowed and in need of company. The calm dynamic that only Andrew and I shared at home was drastically changed by her arrival. Because of the rigorous nature of my work, I frequently have to stay at the office past 7:00 p.m. The scene that welcomes me home simply makes me feel more tired. There are frequently snacks and clothes all over the living room. Andrew, on the other hand, is barely recognizing my presence as he relaxes on the sofa with his beer and TV, seemingly unaware of the pandemonium around him. I'm left to take care of the kitchen chores alone because dinner isn't ready, and my dissatisfaction is getting worse by the minute. My mother-in-law frequently comes out of her room these evenings to chastise me, saying that my late nights and business travels are no justification for shirking my responsibilities at home. She calls me out for not being a good housewife and twists every little thing into a personal attack on my personality. I eventually discovered that reacting or attempting to defend myself just makes things worse. I've discovered that it's better to listen to her and wait for her to cool off. Even though it's far from perfect, this strategy keeps the peace, at least for the time being, and stops more arguments. I consider her critiques for a time before turning my focus back to making dinner. Her remarks hurt, but I keep going because I know she'll stop eventually. The response from my spouse, though, is more difficult to put up with. It appears that he enjoys witnessing my mother-in-law chastise me. Wives ought to value their spouses. She says, "You lack charm," a lot. And my husband laughs, echoing her, making fun of me while I lie at the dinner table. Not only is she the target of my wrath, but my husband's attitude is also getting to me. I beg them all the time to start supper without me, but they never do when I'm running late for work. They wait impassively for me to treat them like a servant when I eventually make it home. Since my mother-in-law moved in with us, things have gotten much worse in our house. My husband was a true partner before she came, helping out around the house, preparing meals when I was running late, and taking an active role in raising our children. However, he has since completely ceased helping and joined my mother-in-law in her criticisms. It's perplexing as well as annoying. She calls me inept and lazy, but she is the one who depends on us. Despite receiving money from her late spouse, she hasn't contributed monetarily. Instead, she wasted it on pleasures, quickly depleting her savings and even accruing debt. She resides with us almost rent-free these days. We had this conflict from the moment we moved in together. She said she would be thoughtful and even bowed low to demonstrate her sincerity. But only one day later she went back to her old habits and blamed me for not doing the cleaning. Her abrupt change was almost comical at first, but it soon became serious. She criticized not only my housekeeping, but also my professional responsibilities, calling me a bad wife for putting so much emphasis on my career. I attempted to clarify that occasionally my work requires late hours, but it didn't seem to register. I tried to explain, but my mother-in-law would not listen. Rather, as though it would be more appropriate, she recommended that I take a part-time work at the neighborhood grocery store. She was unaware of the practicalities of my profession, but she had a predetermined notion of what a daughter-in-law ought to be like. Living with her became increasingly challenging. Any dissatisfaction she had, like with our meal choices, would lead to complaints. Even simple routines like breakfast turned into issues. We used to grab bread or buy lunch, but she disapproved of these habits. Reluctantly, she started following our household rules, but not without constant grumbling. Dinner time became the focal point of contention. She insisted that it be served promptly at 7:00 p.m. with at least 3 side dishes and demanded that everyone eat together. She claimed this was what normal families did, but my work often kept me well past 7:00 p.m., making her demands impractical. Her rigid expectations clashed with the reality of my professional obligations, which were essential for our financial stability. She expressed doubts about my job's necessity, implying that my husband Andrew's salary ought to be adequate and that my work was more motivated by personal preference than by a need for money. I turned to Andrew for consolation, but he waved me off, saying I would finally learn my lesson. My fury was only heightened by his lack of defense. It appeared that he was comfortable portraying the empathetic, uncaring spouse who was unable to assist with home duties. This behavior infuriated me even more, because he immediately linked himself with my mother-in-law upon moving in, rather than standing by me. Since then, it seems like they are working together to treat me unfairly. My mother-in-law would always interrupt me when I tried to get Andrew to help with the housekeeping, saying that was the wife's job, and Andrew never questioned her. I was perplexed by this shift in dynamics because we used to work well together. After a while, I began to see a pattern. Andrew would smirk every time his mother gave me a hard time. I realized that maybe he didn't like that I made more money than he did, and that was why he could have been reluctant to help out around the house. I started to wonder about a lot of things in our relationship and how much had changed since his mother moved in with us when I came to this realization. Since he is typically viewed as the family provider, Andrew is unable to express his dissatisfaction, but I have a suspicion that he has been enjoying the arrangement from the start. After my mother-in-law came in, she publicly questioned if Andrew was actually the head of the family and regularly criticized my role in the home. When I was reprimanded, this seemed to give him a certain kind of satisfaction, exposing a part of my husband that I hadn't completely acknowledged before. After we moved in together, even after all these years, I had many nervous days wondering what to do. The mood had changed from one of peace to one of perpetual anxiety. My mother-in-law was a constant source of trouble, and Andrew was showing himself to be untrustworthy. Before she came, I hadn't felt the need to make any drastic decisions. One day, while I was out shopping, a neighbor approached me with a remark that caught me off guard. She suggested I should be more considerate towards my mother-in-law. Surprised, I asked her to elaborate. She confessed that she wasn't fond of her mother-in-law, but didn't consider herself inconsiderate. Then she revealed something unsettling. My mother-in-law had been talking about me. According to her, I neglected all housework. Our home was always a mess, and laundry was perpetually piled up. She claimed her rheumatism was worsening because she had to do chores herself since her son Andrew returned home late. Hearing how I was being portrayed was shocking, as a neglectful wife who relied on bread for every meal, leaving my mother-in-law to lament and complain. This narrative had begun to affect how people in our neighborhood viewed me. it became clear that the cold, less friendly reactions I was receiving were due to the stories my mother-in-law was spreading. Despite her small, frail appearance, she knew how to elicit sympathy from others, painting herself as a victim of a lazy daughter-in-law who shirked all household responsibilities. The neighbor's look was one of cold accusation, reflecting the impact of these harmful tales. Feeling a deep sense of embarrassment that our family issues had become neighborhood gossip, I murmured a denial and quickly returned home. As I entered the living room, I found my mother-in-law absorbed in her TV show, snacking away. "Please stop spreading rumors," I urged firmly. To my dismay, she just laughed and insisted, "But it's true." Something inside me reached its breaking point. If she was determined to persist in her falsehoods, then I would no longer uphold the pretense of a dutiful daughter-in-law. The very next day, after returning from work, I was met with the usual demands for dinner this time. However, I bypassed my husband and mother-in-law's complaints, went straight to the kitchen, and prepared just a single serving of instant ramen for myself. Seeing this, my mother-in-law's face turned a shade of crimson, her protest growing louder. "So you're just proving you're the worst daughter-in-law? Not doing any housework, huh? Fine, if that's the way you want to be," she declared angrily. As I quietly enjoyed my noodles, she was left speechless, eventually turning to my husband seeking his support. When he approached me, I laid out the whole situation. "Mom's been telling everyone that I'm a terrible daughter-in-law who neglects the housework." When I confronted her, she doubled down on her claims. "So I've decided to just stop doing it altogether. I'm only doing what she's been telling everyone." I shared the encounter with the neighbor from the previous day. My husband, looking concerned, tried to mediate. "Mom probably just exaggerated. Don't be so stubborn," he suggested. Despite his mother clearly being in the wrong, he still sided with her. Exhausted, and without the energy to argue further, I discarded the empty ramen cup, ignored his pleas, and retreated to the bathroom. There, I did my laundry and took a bath in solitude. As I soaked, a wave of relief washed over me. It became clear that regardless of my efforts, I was always going to be labeled as the bad wife. From that moment on, I decided to stop engaging in the household tasks my mother-in-law complained about. She bemoaned the lack of freshly baked bread for breakfast on my days off, but I remained steadfast in my new resolve. When I woke up and stepped into the living room, my mother-in-law demanded that I go out and buy bread immediately. In response, I retorted, "Why don't you buy it yourself? I'm such a bad wife. I'll only buy my share from now on. You'll need to pay for your food or handle it yourself." With that, I ignored her protests, made myself coffee, and quickly ate my bread. As I watched her reaction, a part of me worried that I might have been too harsh, but considering all I had endured, it felt justified. After finishing my breakfast, I tidied only my part of the cluttered living room and settled down with a book. The calm was soon interrupted by the doorbell. Glancing at the monitor, I saw a group of more than 4 elderly people, all familiar faces, standing there with visibly upset expressions. Confused, I watched as my mother-in-law rushed to greet them. They filed in one after the other, and I was taken aback when one of them berated me. "I hear you're the wicked woman who doesn't even care for her mother-in-law." These visitors were my mother-in-law's siblings and their spouses. She had spread false tales of mistreatment, accusing me of not feeding her properly and not allowing her to bathe, pleading for their intervention. Being the youngest of 4 with 3 elder siblings, she had a significant support network. Now, with spouses included, There were 8 elderly people in my living room labeling me as some kind of demon wife deserving of retribution. Their accusations made me break out in a cold sweat from fear. "This is a misunderstanding," I finally managed to say, my voice trembling. But then the eldest brother raised his voice, pounded his cane on the floor, and yelled, "Stop making excuses." The others joined him, demanding that I apologize and reflect on my supposed misdeed. Just then, my husband arrived, drawn by the noise. When my mother-in-law's brother turned to criticize my upbringing, my husband didn't defend me. Instead, he joined in the criticism, adding to the chorus of voices against me. My affection for him vanished in that instant. I had always believed my husband was a kind person until we began living with my mother-in-law. It became clear that he wasn't kind. He was just weak, easily influenced by those around him, and unable to withstand any form of pressure. During a heated discussion, one of my mother-in-law's brothers took my husband's criticisms to heart and suggested a divorce. To my dismay, everyone seemed to agree. My mother-in-law then offered me a so-called second chance, provided I promised to change and better serve her and my husband in the future. Trying to hold back tears, her siblings urged me to be grateful, claiming I would never find a kinder mother-in-law elsewhere. They even decided to implement a rotating schedule, taking turns each week to check whether I was keeping up with the household chores and attending to my mother-in-law and husband's needs adequately. Once their plans were set, everyone appeared content and decided to celebrate their reunion with a sushi outing. Leaving the house together, as they departed, my mother-in-law couldn't resist a parting shot, instructing me to ensure the house was clean and the laundry done by the time they returned. I was left to wonder how things had escalated to this point. Alone in the cluttered living room, tears began to well up. Our marriage had been happy until my mother-in-law's intrusion. Now, I found myself the subject of complaints from all the relatives despite doing my best. Tears streamed down my face, a mix of sadness, regret, and anger. A few hours later, my husband and mother-in-law came back. I was still sitting in the disarrayed living room. My mother-in-law smirked at me, her words sharp with disdain. "Leave. We don't need a wife who can't do housework. I told you to clean up earlier, didn't I?" Seemingly tipsy, she demanded that I leave immediately. My husband, with a grin on his face, joined in, thinking his support would ensure I complied. Quietly, I had reached my limit and no longer had the desire to exert myself for them. "Fine, I'll leave then," I said calmly as I stood to exit. In the living room behind me, I heard my mother-in-law and husband laughing, probably thinking I was just bluffing. But their reactions didn't matter to me anymore. I went to my room, packed my things, and left the house without another word. About a week later, my mother-in-law called me in a panic. "Andrew says he has no money." "What does that mean?" she asked frantically. I responded with the stark truth. "Andrew earns only 1/3 of what I do. I've been covering most of our expenses, and the house is in my name. I'm planning to sell it, so you'll need to leave soon." She thought I was joking until I urged her to check the bank statements in her drawer. There was silence on the other end of the phone as the reality of the situation set in. Then the pleading began. She apologized, said Andrew was lonely, and begged me to come back. But I was determined, so I told her that I was going to file for divorce through my attorney. I ignored her heartfelt apologies and ended the phone. I filed for divorce with legal aid, citing my mother-in-law's intolerable behavior and my husband's lack of support as justifications. The divorce was approved quickly, and I even got a little payout. My children were understanding when I told them about the circumstances, and they agreed that my husband and his mother were solely to blame. My ex-husband and his mother were obliged to move out after the divorce and temporarily stay with relatives when I sold the house. Their time there was brief since they soon had to move into a tiny apartment as they struggled to make ends meet on his meager salary. They now spend their days blaming each other for their misfortunes, from what I've heard. In the meantime, my spouse has been messaging constantly, requesting a reconciliation and asserting that he no longer has any relationship with his mother. But these communications are more of a bother than anything, so in order to keep my peace, I'm thinking of banning him. I feel freed and prepared to live my life on my terms, putting my personal fulfillment and well-being first, without their unceasing criticism. That day seems like it was yesterday to me. My name is Ava, and that day, even though I was only 6 years old, altered my life forever. Mom and I were alone in our house as Dad had left on another business trip. The doorbell rang when I was in the living room playing with my dolls. Mom hurried to respond, her face beaming with joy upon recognizing the person. She said, "Ava, honey, go to your room and play," her voice trembling with anticipation. I followed her instructions, but my curiosity overcame me. Glancing around the corner, I noticed a tall man that I didn't know. Mom was moving quicker than I had ever seen her move, hurrying to stuff clothes into a suitcase. Mom quickly packed her bag and made her way to the door. I emerged from my hiding place, feeling both afraid and bewildered. I said, "Mommy, where are you going?" She looked away from me as she continued, "Sweetheart, I have to go away for a while. Be a good girl for Daddy, okay?" And then she was gone without warning. Nothing except the sound of a car engine beginning and then dying away. No hug, no kiss, farewell. I waited for her to return while I stood there looking at the locked door, but she never did. The house felt more spacious and empty than it had ever felt. As darkness fell, my fear increased. I reached for the light switches, but my height prevented me from turning on the lights. I felt like the darkness was closing in on me as I began to cry. "Mommy? Daddy?" I called out repeatedly, but nobody answered. I have no idea how many days have gone by. I was dehydrated and hungry, and I could feel demons lurking in the shadows, ready to devour me. I sobbed till my eyes dried out, then cowered down in a corner, trembling in terror. I heard voices outside at last. Mrs. Jeremy, our neighbor, was engaged in conversation. "I've been hearing a child crying for days," she stated. "I'm worried something might have happened." The door flew open, and all of a sudden my dad, the neighbors, and police officers were inside the house. He exclaimed, "Ava," and gathered me into his arms. "Oh God, Ava, I'm so sorry." Weeping with relief over his shoulder, I clung to him. A policeman was carrying a piece of paper, as I noticed. "Mr. James, I think you should read this," the policeman stated gravely. Dad let me down gently and picked up the note. His face dropped as he read it. It seemed as though years had gone by in the blink of an eye. "She's gone," he said. "Amy has left. She moved away from us." The following few weeks flew by. Dad came to be with me. He took time off work. We had a full house of visitors, including friends, family, and a kind woman Dad claimed to be a child psychologist. Dad was informed by the psychologist that Ava had experienced trauma. It's normal for her to have some fears and anxieties after what happened. And my anxieties, oh my, were real. Without a light on, I was too afraid of the dark to sleep. Every time Dad had to go, I would freak out because I thought he would not return either. The fear never ever left me. It became an inherent part of my identity, much like my green eyes and brown hair. I became Ava James, the girl who was abandoned by her mother, the girl who was terrified of the dark, and the girl who was terrified of being alone. Days became weeks, and weeks became months, until life began to feel normal once more, just not the same kind of normal. Dad and I joined forces to navigate this new world without Mom as a team of two. He became proficient at braiding my hair after learning how to do it. He wasn't very good at first. I mastered the art of making his favorite cup of coffee. Then Dad's meeting with Lauren altered everything. He first introduced me to her when I was 8 years old. Lauren immediately put me at ease with her lovely smile and compassionate gaze. Lauren settled into our lives as a regular throughout the ensuing weeks. I couldn't express how much I appreciated that she didn't try to take the place of my mother. Rather, she established her own position inside our small family. I once overheard Dad on the phone with her. "It's probably time, Lauren. Are you going to live with us?" Within a week, Lauren took over. Instead of attempting to be my mother, she developed into a friend, which is equally as significant. She did a great job braiding my hair, assisted me with my homework, and always made sure my room had a nightlight. As the years went by, more changes occurred. After Dad's business took off, we found ourselves in a posh neighborhood and a large new home. I have a private room with a view of the rear pool and a walk-in closet. Still, certain things remained the same. Even so, I used the nightlight to sleep. I used to become nervous whenever Dad went on a business trip, and occasionally I would catch him staring at old pictures of Mom late at night. My 11th birthday began just like any other. Pancakes were Lauren's special birthday present for me, and I woke up to the fragrance of them. Dad had just got home from work, and we were having a little get-together later. Up until the doorbell rang, everything appeared to be ideal. I froze as soon as I entered the living room. My mother was standing there, obviously older than she actually was. Adjacent to her was a young child, perhaps 6 years old, gazing around with big eyes while clutching a teddy bear. "Amy," Dad responded sharply. "What are you doing here?" Mom inhaled deeply. "I sincerely apologize for everything, Larry. I am aware that I have no business being here, however." She gave the young girl a gesture. "My name is Maria. She is your offspring." There was silence in the room. I experienced difficulty breathing. Dad's expression wavered between shock, wrath, incredulity, and something more. "Again, my daughter?" he asked. Mom gave a nod. When I departed, I was expecting. I swear I had no idea at the time. "I've messed up so much, Larry. Maria needs to know who her father is, and I'm not pleading with you for forgiveness." I saw Dad bend over to put himself at the small girl's level. Saying, "Hi, Maria," he spoke quietly. "I'm your dad." Maria timidly glanced up at him. "Hi," she said in a whisper. I saw pale-faced Lauren waiting at the doorway while Dad spoke with Maria. She turned and hurriedly moved on. I wanted to go with her, but I felt immobile. The next few hours were a haze, filled with tears, heated voices, and a lot of adult talks that I wasn't meant to hear. I hid in my room and tried to make sense of everything by putting my knees up against my chest. Dad came over to chat to me later that night. He sat on the edge of my bed and said, "Ava, I know this is a lot to take in. While your mother has made some serious errors, Maria is innocent in all of this. You have a sister named her. For Maria's sake, I've made the decision to give your mom another shot. I observed via my window the following day as Lauren loaded her car. She raised her head to see me staring at her, with tears in her eyes. She gave a farewell wave. I returned her wave, feeling as though a piece of myself was going with her. That same day, Mom and Maria moved in. Mom took over her former spot in Dad's room, and Maria occupied the guest room. She felt as though she was wiping out the previous 6 years as if they had never happened. The ensuing years were challenging. My mother had returned, but it was not the joyous family get-together I had imagined. I may have fantasized about being close to my mother when I was younger, but it never truly materialized. She loved Maria dearly and showered her with affection, but there remained a constant barrier between us and an enduring uneasiness. Maria didn't ask to get involved in this complex scenario. She was only a little child. It was difficult, especially when I observed how seamlessly she integrated into Mom and Dad's lives, in a manner that I never seemed to be able to. By the time I turned 19, I was more than ready to leave for college. I decided to study zoology because animals were always easier for me to understand than people. They didn't judge, they didn't have complicated emotions, and they didn't come with messy family histories. They just were. The day I left for college was bittersweet. Dad hugged me tightly, his eyes misty. "I'm so proud of you, Ava," he said. "You're going to do great things." Mom gave me an awkward pat on the shoulder and said, "Good luck," but her smile didn't quite reach her eyes. Maria, now 14, rolled her eyes and muttered, "Finally, I get my own room." I pretended not to hear her and focused on Dad's warm embrace. College was a relief. For the first time, I was away from the tension at home and the constant reminder of my complicated family situation. I threw myself into my studies, finding peace in the world of animals and nature. But even though I did well in school, I struggled socially. Years of feeling like an outsider in my own family had left a mark. I was quiet, reserved, and always afraid of getting too close to people. What if they left, like Mom had? What if they replaced me, like Maria seemed to have done? Instead, I found comfort at the small zoo on campus, where I volunteered in my spare time, caring for the animals. There was a particularly grumpy old llama named Larry who became my favorite. He didn't like most people, but he seemed to tolerate me. The years at college went by quickly, and before I knew it, I was graduating. As I stood in my cap and gown, diploma in hand, I scanned the crowd. Dad was there, beaming with pride. Mom and Maria were there too, clapping politely. "Congratulations, Iva," Mom said stiffly. "Your father and I have been talking, and well, we think it's time you started looking for your own place. You know, spread your wings." I felt like I had been punched in the stomach. I looked at Dad, hoping he would disagree with Mom, but he just looked away, his face full of pain. "Right," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "Of course, I'll start looking right away." The days after my graduation were tense. I was back in my childhood home, but it didn't feel welcoming at all. Dad tried his best to make me feel comfortable, but Mom and Maria made it clear that I was not wanted there. "Ava, have you started looking for jobs yet?" Mom would ask during breakfast, her tone pretending to be sweet. "You know it's important to get your foot in the door early." Maria would add with a smirk, "Yeah, and maybe you could find your own place too. It's getting kind of cramped around here." Nights were the hardest. I still needed my nightlight to sleep, something Maria didn't miss. One evening, as I was getting ready for bed, she barged into my room. "Seriously," she scoffed, pointing at my nightlight. "You're 23. And you still need that? No wonder you don't have any friends. I felt my cheeks burn with shame. Leave me alone, Maria, I muttered, but she wasn't finished. The next day at dinner, she brought it up again, this time in front of everyone. Hey, Mom, Dad, she said, her voice dripping with fake concern. Don't you think Ava should see a therapist or something? I mean, she's an adult who's afraid of the dark and can't make friends. That's not normal, right? Something inside me snapped. Years of bottled-up hurt and anger burst out. You want to know why I'm like this, Maria? I said, my voice shaking. It's because when I was 6, my mother left me alone in a dark, empty house for days. Do you have any idea what that does to a child? The table went silent. Dad stared down at his plate, his face full of guilt and pain. Mom's eyes widened in shock and then quickly filled with tears. How dare you? She cried, her voice rising dramatically. How can you be so cruel and vindictive? I've tried so hard to make amends, to be a family again, and this is how you repay me. As Mom continued her tearful rant, Maria smirked triumphantly. I realized something. I couldn't live here anymore. This wasn't my home, and these people, they weren't my family. Not really. From that day on, I threw myself into job hunting with new determination. Finally, a glimmer of hope. I had an interview scheduled at a small wildlife rehabilitation center. It wasn't glamorous, but it was a start. I left the house that morning feeling cautiously optimistic. But when I arrived, I found a hastily scribbled note on the door. Interviews canceled due to unforeseen circumstances. We apologize for the inconvenience. Disappointed, I headed home earlier than expected. I unlocked the front door and heard voices coming from the living room, Mom and Maria, deep in conversation. I was about to let them know I was home when I heard my name. If Ava wasn't around at all, Maria was saying, I mean, it's not fair that she gets any of Dad's money. She's not even really part of this family. I know, sweetie, Mom replied in a calming voice, but we have to be patient. Once she moves out, it'll be easier to convince your father to change his will. We just need to keep pushing her to leave. It felt like a bucket of ice water had been poured over me. They didn't just want me out of the house, they wanted me out of the family entirely, and they were after my inheritance too. I sat on my bed, my mind racing. What should I do? Should I tell Dad? But would he believe me over Mom and Maria? He had forgiven Mom for leaving us before, and he loved them both. Maybe he'd take their side. My first bit of luck came when I saw a job posting for the Oklahoma City Zoo. They needed a zoologist to help with their wildlife rehabilitation program. It wasn't a fancy job, but it was exactly what I had been trained for. I sent in my application right away, and to my surprise and happiness, I got called in for an interview. On the day of the interview, I stood in front of the zoo's main gate, taking deep breaths to calm my nerves. The interview went better than I could have imagined. The head zoologist, Dr. Frank, seemed impressed with my knowledge and passion. You've got the job, Ava, she said with a warm smile. Welcome to the team. I could have cried with relief. Finally, something was going right. Working at the zoo was everything I'd hoped for and more. I spent my days caring for injured wildlife, educating visitors about conservation, and even helping with research projects. In the evenings, I'd return to my tiny apartment, which I was able to rent with the money I saved. To combat loneliness, I started joining online forums for animal lovers and people with similar interests. That's where I met Scott. Scott was from the same city, shared my love for animals, and had a great sense of humor that made me laugh even on my toughest days. We started chatting regularly, sharing stories about our day, and discussing everything from the latest conservation efforts to our favorite books. One day, Scott suggested we exchange photos. With trembling hands, I sent him a recent picture of me at the zoo. He replied with a photo of himself. He had kind eyes and a warm smile that made my heart skip a beat. But as much as I enjoyed our conversations, the idea of meeting in person or even admitting my growing feelings scared me. What if he rejected me once he got to know the real me? What if he left, just like Mom did? Around this time, I started talking with Hannah, a girl I met on a support forum for people with childhood trauma. She understood my fears in a way no one else had before. "You know what helps me?" Hannah wrote. "One day, I write emails to the people I can't talk to in real life. I pour out everything I'm feeling, all the things I wish I could say, but I don't send them. I just save them as drafts. It's really healing." Taking Hannah's advice, I started writing emails to Dad. In them, I told him everything. How I overheard Mom and Maria's conversation, how I was hurt that he didn't seem to notice me anymore, and how I felt like an outsider in my own family. I also started writing to Scott. In these emails, I allowed myself to be vulnerable in a way I couldn't be in our chats. "Scott," I wrote, "I think I'm falling for you, but I'm scared. I'm scared of letting anyone get close to me. I'm scared of being hurt again." These emails too remained unsent, my feelings safely tucked away in my drafts folder. Dad would call occasionally, his voice a mix of concern and confusion. "Ava, honey," he'd say, "why don't you come over for dinner this weekend? We miss you." Each time, I'd come up with an excuse. "Sorry, Dad, I've got a big project at work," or "I'm not feeling well this week. Maybe next time." Then one Thursday afternoon, I was at the mall picking up some essentials when I heard a familiar voice call my name. "Ava, is that you?" I turned around, and there she was, Lauren, my former stepmother. She looked older, but her kind eyes were just the same. Before I knew it, we were hugging, years of separation melting away in an instant. That's when I noticed a young boy standing beside her, looking up at us curiously. "This is my nephew, Justin," Lauren explained, ruffling the boy's hair affectionately. "I'm raising him now." Lauren's voice was soft. "My sister passed away last year. Over coffee." Lauren filled me in on her life after she and Dad split up. She had been on her own until her sister's death left Justin in her care. After that, we started meeting regularly, sometimes just the two of us, sometimes with Justin. One day, Lauren called and urgently asked me to look after Justin for the evening. Justin arrived at my apartment, backpack and towel. As I prepared dinner in my tiny kitchen, I could hear him tapping away on my laptop in the living room. I told him he could play the games if he finished his homework. When I came out of the kitchen with 2 plates of spaghetti, I found Justin looking guilty, his face pale. "Ava," he said, his voice trembling, "I did something bad. I was curious. And I saw these emails in your drafts folder, and I sent them, all of them. I'm so sorry." The world seemed to spin around me. Those emails, my private thoughts, my deepest feelings, had been sent out into the world, to Dad and to Scott. I felt like I couldn't breathe. That night, after Justin left, I lay in bed, my mind racing. What would Dad think? And Scott, oh God, Scott. My phone pinged with a message notification. It was from Scott, but I couldn't bring myself to read it. What if he was disgusted by my feelings? What if he never wanted to speak to me again? I barely slept that night, tossing and turning, imagining all the worst-case scenarios. A few days later, my phone rang. It was Dad. "Ava," he said, his voice serious. "We need to talk. Can you meet me at the cafe near your old high school?" My heart pounded as I sat across from Dad in the small cafe. He looked tired, his face showing lines I hadn't noticed before. "I got your emails," he said quietly. "Ava, I had no idea you were feeling this way. About your mother, about Maria, about everything." I couldn't meet his eyes, feeling a mix of shame and fear inside me. "Ava, look at me," Dad said, his voice gentle but firm. I looked up, surprised to see tears in his eyes. "I love you more than anything in this world. I'm so sorry. I made you feel like you weren't important to me. That was never, ever my intention." We talked for hours. Really talked, in a way we hadn't in years. We talked about Mom's return, about Maria, and about how I had felt pushed aside and forgotten. Dad listened, really listened, occasionally wiping away a tear. Finally, he stood up. "I need some time to process all this," he said, "but Ava, we're going to figure this out. You and me." As I watched him walk away, I felt a mix of relief and nervousness. What was going to happen now? But I didn't have much time to think about it, because my phone rang again. It was Scott. "Ava," he said, his voice warm but a little nervous. "I got your email, and I feel the same way. I've been too scared to say it, but I really like you. Would you like to meet for coffee?" My heart soared. "Yes," I said, surprised by how steady my voice was. "I'd love to." The next day, I met Scott at a small coffee shop. He was even more handsome in person, with a kind smile that put me at ease right away. We talked for hours about our fears, dreams, and pasts. For the first time in years, I felt truly seen and understood. As the autumn leaves began to fall, my phone rang one crisp morning. It was Dad. "Ava," he said, his voice warm but with something serious underneath. "I'd like you to come to Thanksgiving dinner. It's important to me that you're there." Something in his tone made me agree. Thanksgiving Day arrived, and I stood on the doorstep of my childhood home, my heart pounding. Scott had offered to come with me for support, but I felt this was something I needed to face on my own. Mom opened the door, her smile not quite reaching her eyes. "Ava, how nice of you to join us." Maria, lounging on the couch, barely looked up from her phone. "Oh, you came." Dad emerged from the kitchen and hugged me warmly. "I'm glad you're here, sweetheart," he whispered. As we sat down to dinner, the tension was thick. Mom and Maria exchanged glances, their smiles forced and fake, but Dad seemed unusually calm. Just as Mom started to serve Oklahoma, Dad cleared his throat. "Before we begin, there's something we need to discuss," he stated. He extracted a big manila folder from behind his chair by reaching down. Dad started setting papers out on the table. "Amy Maria," he replied, "I've known for a while that something wasn't right, so I did some investigating." A bank statement was held up by him. First, I discovered regular withdrawals from our accounts that I didn't make. Quite substantial amounts, in fact. Mama's face went pale, and all of a sudden, Maria was fascinated by her dish. Dad went on, taking out a second document. "I also employed Amy, a private investigator. He gave you photographic proof of your meetings at the motel in Oklahoma City with a certain individual." Mom let out a gasp and reached for her mouth. "Hey, Larry, I could provide an explanation." But Dad was far from done. His hand trembling a little, he took out one last document. "I had a DNA test done," Dad muttered. "Maria isn't my biological daughter." There was silence in the room. Maria let go of her phone, which fell to the ground with a crash. Mom appeared as if she could pass out. Dad said, maintaining a steady tone despite the emotion in his eyes. "I've already spoken to my lawyer," he added. "Amy, I'm filing for divorce, and I'm afraid I'll have to ask both you and Maria to leave this house." Mom spoke up again, her shock giving way to rage. "This is not something you can accomplish. I'll accept you for everything that you possess." Dad's face became stern. "You won't, Amy, in reality. I'll countersue you and demand that you return all of the money you've taken, plus the money I spent raising Maria, if you try to claim any property. I have a very solid case, my lawyer tells me." As Mom realized how bad the situation was, tears fell down her face. As her life crumbled around her, Maria sat in startled stillness. Over the next few days, Mom and Maria moved out. My father and I started to mend our relationship, and now it's stronger than ever. We began having long discussions, dinners every week, and even started organizing a road trip as father and daughter. Dad mentioned Lauren hesitantly one day with coffee. He confessed, "I've been thinking a lot about the past and the mistakes I made. I apologized to Lauren over email. We've been getting together over coffee to discuss various issues." Sincerely glad for him, I smiled. "That's fantastic, Dad. Lauren is a very remarkable woman." For my part, my relationship with Scott was going more smoothly than I could have ever dreamed. He was kind, understanding, and patient with my fears and insecurities. I was even beginning to work through my problems in therapy with his help.